Hello everyone, my name is Lucy and I'm one of the reading specialists at the Reading Connection. In my other previous poetry videos, we had already talked about parts of a poem, elements of poetry, characteristics of poems, poetry sound devices, and today we're going to be tackling the topic of figurative language, which you might see in a poem. You have probably heard a lot about these, but just didn't know what they were called. The elements included for figurative language are simile, metaphor, personification, and idioms.
Midnight snack. I was a hungry lion when I woke up late one night. My tummy started growling, and so I flipped on the light. The stairs all groaned beneath me as I crept quiet as a mouse. My belly was rumbling thunder as I wandered through my house. I saw my brother's cupcake, and it called to me by name. I knew I shouldn't take a bite, but I tasted it all the same.
Yummy.
Sly as a fox, I turned around. My brother asked me what I'd done. I felt a frog stuck in my throat, and the cat had gotten my tongue. Then I thought he'd blow his top as I wiped frosting off my cheek. But he smiled sweet as pie and said, "You'll be doing my chores all week."
The poem you just heard is the one right here, and in order to better help us understand what figurative language is, we're going to use this foldable that I have here right in front of me. Now we're going to go ahead and first look at the first element here, which is the word simile. If we take a good look at this word, it kind of looks like the word smile, but just keep in mind there's an I between the S and the M, so it says simile. Now for this one, we're going to do our color coding that we've been doing with our past videos, and in this case we're going to use our highlighter yellow to describe what a simile is. And in our definition, it says that a simile uses like or as to compare two unlike things. Okay, and so we're basically comparing two things, but they are things that are not like each other. So the way that you're always going to know that it is a simile is because you're going to see that it has these two key words, like or as, and we're actually going to look for some in our poem right here. Okay, so it looks like we have one right here. I'm gonna highlight it for you, which says, "As I crept quiet as a mouse." Okay, here in this area, I am basically comparing the way I am creeping to how a mouse creeps. Technically, I'm probably not ever going to be as quiet as a mouse because I am bigger and the mouse is smaller. So the mouse can move without making any noise. But we're comparing how I am moving and with the same movements of a very tiny creature, which is a mouse. And of course, I am not like a mouse in any way, but again, we're comparing how quiet I was being, or the narrator was being in this poem, to the way a mouse would be as well, or his movements. Okay. And if we move on to another example, we have here what it says, sly as a fox. Okay, so here's our word as. That's how we know that this is a simile. And I am being sly or sneaky, just as a fox would be sneaky. Now, I don't have any or lots of characteristics that would remind you of a fox, but this is a pretty common saying because we think of a fox as a very sneaky creature. They will sneak into the hen of the house or the hen house and steal eggs or maybe even a chicken. Even though I'm not going to move in a very sneaky, quiet way like they do, and I'm just comparing myself to the sneaky or the sly of a fox. So once again, something I am not very much alike. Okay, I'm not much like a fox, but we're just comparing those two things. Okay, being sneaky. So it's a comparison of two unlike things. Okay, now I do see another one down here, and I'm gonna also highlight it in yellow so that you can see it better. And this one says, but he smiled sweet as pie. Okay, here's that word again, as. That's how we know that it is a simile, okay? Going back to those two key words, like or as. Now, in this case, I am comparing his smile and the sweetness of his smile to the sweetness of a piece of pie. Now, the sweetness of a piece of pie, I can taste. But the sweetness of his smile, I can't. The only thing I can say is something along the lines of, "Aw, that is so sweet." So sweet kind of has two different meanings here. I'm really comparing two things that really isn't the same thing at all. You can't compare something like, oh, she's a sweet girl, to the sweetness of a piece of candy, because those two are just two different kinds of sweet. But that's what I'm doing here, right? I'm saying, but he smiled sweet as pie. So all of these three different examples that I just gave you, these are giving you examples with the word as, just like we did here, as, and as. But I had also mentioned that there are other examples that use the word like. And let me give you an example of one. So one would be something along the lines of, she was slow like a turtle. So in that case, you're comparing her movements to the movements of an animal creature, which is the turtle, who happens to move in a very slow motion. So she, whoever she may be, doesn't look like a turtle. But again, they're using those two comparisons of the movements, moving slowly. Okay. Metaphor. And note on here that we have a PH, which makes the sound. And this one is actually very similar to what a simile is, but in a metaphor, you are just basically saying that there are two different things that are the same thing, okay? And for this one here, we're going to use our orange marker so that we can color code what this might be, okay? And instead of saying like or as something else, like we do in a simile, you're not with a metaphor. You are just saying it is when it's really not. You are saying two different things are the same thing. And we're going to look at some examples of metaphors in our poem. Okay, so I have one right up here. It's the very first sentence of our poem, which says, I was a hungry lion. I didn't say I was as hungry as a lion, or that I was hungry like a lion. I didn't say that. Okay, that would be a simile, because I would use as or like to compare my hunger to a lion. This is saying I am. Okay, I am a hungry lion. So we can picture a hungry lion out in the prowl hunting, and this is exactly what the narrator in the poem is doing. Okay, she was hunting for something to eat. Okay, now another example would be right here. And okay, I hope you can see that. And this one says, my belly was rumbling thunder. Is the belly really capable of rumbling thunder? No, it can't. But it does make noises when it's hungry. It is not just saying that the belly was rumbling or making noises. The poem is actually saying that it is thunder. So just remember that with a metaphor, we're not using like or as like we are with a simile. With a metaphor, we're just saying that there are two different things, and those things are the same thing, when in reality, they're not. This part of the word right here, you see person, or the word person. And this over here says, oops, sorry about that, ification. But when you put it all together, it says personification. And we're going to use our pink highlighter for this one here. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go to our definition of what personification means. And this one says that it gives human qualities to non-human things, okay? Now, the word person in here is actually going to be very important, and you will see why. Well, actually, based on the definition here, we can see why, right? Because it's giving human qualities to something that is non-human, okay? So let's go ahead and look at our poem here. And I'm going to box in this whole line right here. And it says, my tummy started growling. We know what this means because we hear it all the time. It is a figure of speech, which is why we call it a figurative language. But my tummy, or the narrator's tummy, can't actually growl. All this is really saying is that in reality a person can do it. It is something a person can do, so a person could growl, but not the tummy. The tummy cannot. Okay, so it's just giving human characteristics or human qualities to something that isn't, which is the tummy. Now, if I go down to this stanza, which is stanza number 2, I'm also going to box in this whole row right here. And this one says, the stairs all groaned beneath me. Okay, well, stairs can't really groan. We do know that they can make creaking sounds, and that is why, or actually what we're talking about here. But it sounds more interesting to say that they're groaning or moaning, but that is something that a person can do, not the stairs. Okay, so in this case, we're giving a human quality or characteristics to the stairs. Okay, now we do see another example of what a personification might be. If we come down here to this row, okay, so I boxed it in, and this one says, and it called to me by name. Alright, so remember, we're talking about the brother's cupcake, right? I saw my brother's cupcake, and it called to me by name. Well, did the cupcake really call out my name or the narrator's name? No, but it looked so delicious that the narrator thought that it was calling its name. Okay, so it pulled him or her in with its yummy looking frosting, or maybe even had sprinkles on it. That is all it means here. Yes, the cupcakes can't actually call out the name like a person can, but it was so yummy looking that the narrator in the poem thought that it was calling its name. So again, the personification here is giving these human qualities to the cupcake, and it's letting the narrator think that it's calling its name. I'm going to use my green marker here to color code it as well. Okay, and for idioms, the definition is phrases that do not mean exactly what they say. Okay, so they do not mean exactly what they say. So I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but in reality, you've probably heard a lot of idioms before. You just don't know what it was, but you knew what it was meant just in the manner that it was used. So let's go ahead and find some examples in our poem here. And let's see. I have one right here. I'm going to go ahead and box this one in. Okay, and this one says, I felt a frog stuck in my throat. Okay, did I really have, or did the narrator have a frog stuck in his throat? No, that would look really weird. What this actually means is that there was some sort of lump in the throat, because he or she, which is the narrator, knew that he had been caught and had done something wrong. So at the moment, the narrator couldn't talk. So he or she, again the narrator, couldn't get the words out for a moment there. But there was not an actual frog stuck in the narrator's throat. So this is not literal, okay? Not literal. I don't mean that there was an actual frog in the narrator's throat. The narrator at the moment just could not talk. Okay, and let's see, if we keep going, let's find another example. Well, there's one right here, right underneath it, and this one says, and the cat had gotten my tongue. Okay, again, was there an actual cat holding the narrator's tongue? I mean, really try to picture that. That would look really weird, wouldn't it? So no, there's no cat here. This is just an idiom. It is an old saying that only means that you can't speak or you can't get your voice out. You're trying to say something and you can't, or at least not at the moment. So you are tongue-tied. In this case, the narrator had done something wrong in eating the brother's cupcake, and so when caught, the narrator couldn't say anything. Now, in a different kind of situation, you could also be tongue-tied because maybe you were shy at the moment, or maybe you got surprised by something and you couldn't find your words there for a moment. So again, this is not literal, okay? The cat here is not grabbing on to the narrator's tongue. Okay, remember, so with idioms, it's just phrases that do not mean exactly what they say. We did a great job with this foldable. We learned about figurative language and how to identify these types of elements in a poem. Thanks so much for joining me today as we learned about figurative language, and which is something that you could possibly see in poems. See you next time, readers and writers.